I saved his life before I even knew his name, and by the time I learned it, it was already too late to walk away. The morning I married Adrian Callahan, my hands wouldn't stop shaking, not because I didn't understand what I was doing, but because somewhere between the hospital parking garage and the diamond ring now circling my finger, my ordinary life had quietly disappeared. If you had told me 3 weeks ago that I would be standing in a silk gown in a private chapel overlooking the Hudson, marrying a billionaire former Mafia CEO, I would have laughed and gone back to charting vitals. That night started like every other double shift at Mercy General. Bad coffee, aching feet, fluorescent lights that made everyone look half dead. It was just after 2 a.m. when I clocked out, the October air sharp and cold as I crossed the employee lot, my breath fogging in front of me. I remember thinking about my student loans, about the rent due on my 600 square foot apartment in Queens, about how exhaustion felt heavier than my scrubs. Then I heard tires screech. Not dramatic. Not cinematic. Just wrong. A black sedan rolled too fast into the far corner of the garage and stopped crooked between two spaces. The driver's door opened slowly. He stepped out like gravity cost him something. Tall. Dark overcoat. One hand braced against the frame. Even in the harsh security lighting, I could see he wasn't steady. I didn't think billionaire. I didn't think powerful. I thought concussion. Shock. I ran toward him because that's what nurses do. Sir, sit down, I said, already guiding him to the curb before he could argue. His eyes lifted to mine, and for a second the world narrowed to that look, green, sharp, assessing like he was memorizing my face. I'm fine, he said, voice low, controlled, the kind of tone men use when they're used to being obeyed. He wasn't fine. His breathing was shallow. His pulse under my fingers was too fast. I called for a gurney and ignored the black SUV that pulled in seconds later. Ignored the men in tailored suits who stepped out scanning the lot like they were counting threats. Inside the ER, the room shifted the moment they followed us in. Conversations softened. People moved aside without being told. I focused on my job. Blood pressure. Oxygen. Questions. He didn't fully answer. He never complained. Never winced. Just watched me like I was the only stable thing in the room. When his condition suddenly dipped, when the monitor's rhythm changed just enough to tighten my chest, I made a call that overruled a resident twice my senior. Trust me, I said, already adjusting the treatment plan. For 3 long minutes, the world shrank to numbers and breath and the steady pressure of my hand at his wrist. Then his vitals stabilized. The tension in the room released like a held breath. I stepped back, only then noticing that the suited men hadn't blinked once. One of them leaned toward another and whispered a name I didn't recognize at the time. Adrian Callahan. By morning, the news alerts lit up my phone. Billionaire CEO survives late-night attack. Former organized crime ties. Corporate empire worth 9 figures. I stared at his photo on the screen and felt something colder than fear settle in my chest. Because I knew those eyes. And I knew he knew exactly who had saved him. By the time my shift ended the next afternoon, his name was everywhere. Financial channels replayed footage of him walking into shareholder meetings. Business articles dissected his transition from rumored underworld ties to legitimate corporate power. Adrian Callahan, 38. Founder and Chief Executive Officer of Callahan Global Holdings. Estimated net worth, $1.4 billion. I stared at the screen in the break room while a pot of burnt coffee bubbled behind me, and tried to reconcile the man in the tailored suit with the one who had nearly collapsed against my shoulder 12 hours earlier. He had not looked like a headline. He had looked human. I told myself that was the end of it. Patients come in. Patients leave. Lives brush against each other and separate. That is how it works. Except it did not separate. 3 days later, I stepped out of my apartment building in Queens at 7:15 in the morning, balancing a paper cup of coffee in my canvas tote, and nearly walked straight into a black SUV parked at the curb. It was spotless. Out of place against the cracked sidewalk and dented sedans lining my street. The rear passenger door opened before I could decide whether to turn around. He stepped out first. Not a bodyguard. Not an assistant. Him. Dark charcoal coat. Crisp white shirt. No tie. The October wind moved through his hair like it had permission. Good morning, Claire, he said like we had planned this. The sound of my name in his voice sent a slow chill down my spine. How do you know where I live? I asked because that felt like the most important question. I make it my business to know things, he replied evenly. No apology. No explanation. Just fact. 2 men remained by the SUV, scanning the street without being obvious about it. My elderly neighbor across the hall pretended to check her mailbox twice. If this is about a hospital bill, I am sure your insurance can handle it, I said, forcing steadiness into my voice. He almost smiled. You overruled a senior resident, he said instead. You insisted on a different course of action. Why? Because it was the right call. You did not hesitate. People do not get that luxury in the emergency room. His gaze held mine for a long second, not intimidating, not soft. Measuring. You saved my life, he said finally. The words were simple, but they landed heavy. I did my job. No, he corrected quietly. You did more than that. A city bus roared past, breaking the moment. I shifted my weight, aware of how small my building looked behind me compared to the vehicle at the curb. If this is your way of saying thank you, you can stop. I do not need anything. His expression changed then, just slightly. Something sharper beneath the calm. That is the problem, he said. You think this is about gratitude. The wind picked up, carrying the faint scent of rain. He stepped closer, not invading, just near enough that I could see the faint scar at his temple I had missed under hospital lights. There are people who know I was vulnerable that night, he continued. They know someone intervened. They will want to know who. My stomach tightened. I am a nurse. I treat hundreds of patients. Not like me. He glanced at the building, then back at me. Your face is not anonymous anymore. For the first time I felt it. Not fear exactly. Awareness. Like the ground beneath my routine life had shifted half an inch. What are you saying? I asked. I am saying, he answered, voice low and certain, that whether you like it or not, you are involved now. I should have told him to leave. I should have walked past him, flagged down a cab, pretended my life had not just tilted on its axis. Instead, I stood there on the cracked sidewalk with the morning traffic building around us, and felt the weight of his certainty settle over me. You are exaggerating, I said, finally lifting my chin. I am a nurse, not a witness in a crime drama. His expression did not change. I am not exaggerating, he replied. You were present at a moment that was not meant to be public. That makes you relevant. I tightened my grip on my coffee cup, aware of how small and ordinary it looked between us. Relevant to who? I asked. He glanced briefly toward the street, as if calculating how much to say. To people who do not appreciate unpredictability, he answered. It was not a threat. It was a statement. The wind picked up again, brushing a strand of hair across my face. I hated that part of me was listening. Hated that another part believed him. So what? I said, forcing steadiness into my voice. You are going to assign me a security detail for the rest of my life? For now, he corrected. Until the situation stabilizes. I do not want that. That is irrelevant. The word hit harder than it should have. I felt heat rise in my chest. You do not get to decide what is relevant in my life, I said. You do not get to show up on my street and rewrite my routine because it makes you feel better. His eyes sharpened, not with anger but with focus. This has nothing to do with how I feel, he said quietly. It has to do with probability. I am not your responsibility. You became my responsibility the moment you stepped in. The confidence in his voice was infuriating. I stepped closer before I could stop myself, lowering my voice. I do not need protection. I need you to stay out of my life. For the first time, something flickered in his expression. Not offense. Not dismissal. Something almost like recognition. You think distance equals safety, he said. It does not. A black sedan rolled slowly past, and I caught one of the suited men speaking into a discreet earpiece. The normal sounds of the neighborhood continued around us, a delivery truck idling, a dog barking from an open window, but I felt suspended between two worlds. If I agree to this, I said carefully, if I let you assign whoever you want to stand on my sidewalk, how long does it last? He held my gaze. Until I am certain you are not a liability. The word stung even though I understood what he meant. So I am a risk calculation now? You are a variable, he said. I exhaled slowly, the air sharp in my lungs. I did not ask for this. Neither did I, he replied. There was no arrogance in it. Just truth. I studied him then, really studied him. The billionaire. The former figure whispered about on business channels. He did not look invincible. He looked tired. Controlled. A man holding the edges of something fragile. You said there are people who would want to know who intervened, I said. What happens if they find out? He did not hesitate. Then I will handle it. The certainty in his voice should have reassured me. Instead, it made my heartbeat quicken. Because for the first time, I understood that my quiet, predictable life had brushed against his world, and his world did not let go easily. He left that morning without waiting for my agreement. That unsettled me more than if he had demanded one. The black SUV remained parked across the street as I rode the subway into Manhattan, and I told myself it was coincidence until I noticed the same dark sedan idling near the hospital entrance when I arrived for my shift. I tried to ignore it, tried to focus on triage charts and the steady rhythm of hospital life. People came in with fevers, sprained ankles, chest tightness brought on by stress. Ordinary emergencies. Tangible problems. But every time the automatic doors slid open, my shoulders tensed. Around noon, I caught a glimpse of one of his men standing near the coffee kiosk across the street. He pretended to scroll through his phone, but his eyes tracked the entrance. I felt it then, the invisible thread connecting my routine to his world. Not dramatic, just constant. That evening, as my shift ended, my phone buzzed with an unknown number. I almost let it go to voicemail. Almost. Claire. His voice said the second I answered. Not a greeting. Not a question. I told you I did not want this, I said, keeping my tone low as I stepped outside into the cool air. You told me many things, he replied calmly. Want does not factor into risk. You cannot just insert yourself into my life. I already have. The certainty in his voice should have made me angrier. Instead, it made my pulse skip. I saw your people, I said. At the hospital. A pause. Not denial. They are there to observe, he said. Observe what? Patterns. The word felt clinical, almost surgical. You are talking about my life like it is a spreadsheet. That is how I survive, he answered. There was no arrogance in it. Just structure. I stepped down the hospital stairs, watching traffic move along First Avenue. Horns blaring, sirens in the distance. New York did not stop for anyone. This will fade, I insisted. News cycles move on. People forget. People like me are not forgotten, he said quietly. Especially by those who look for opportunity. A chill slid down my spine. You said you left that world, I pressed. I left the structure, he replied. Not the history. For a moment neither of us spoke. The wind tugged at my jacket. Across the street, the suited man shifted his stance slightly, pretending to study a storefront window. If I ask you to pull them back, I said carefully, will you? Another pause. Longer this time. No, he said. The honesty stunned me more than refusal would have. You do not get to control everything, I said. I do not control everything, he replied. I control what I can. The city lights flickered on as dusk settled in, casting everything in a muted gold. Why does this matter to you so much? I asked before I could stop myself. You have corporations to run, boards to impress. Why is one nurse from Queens worth this effort? His answer came without hesitation. Because variables become consequences, he said. And I do not allow consequences to spiral. I swallowed, frustration tangling with something else I could not name. I am not a consequence, I said. His voice softened just slightly. That remains to be seen. The line went quiet after that, not abruptly, not rudely. Just finished. I lowered my phone slowly, aware that somewhere nearby, someone was watching to make sure I reached home safely. I had wanted distance. I had demanded independence. Instead, I had stepped into a world where protection came wrapped in control, and I was beginning to understand that walking away might not be as simple as turning my back. The first time I realized he was right, it was a Tuesday evening and nothing dramatic happened. That was what made it worse. I left Mercy General at 8:10 p.m., the sky already dark, the air carrying that metallic hint of coming rain. The black sedan was not parked across the street anymore. No suited man pretending to read his phone. For the first time in days, the sidewalk looked like mine again. I told myself it was over. That maybe he had decided I was no longer worth calculating. I walked 2 blocks toward the subway, shoulders loosening, breath evening out. Halfway down the stairs to the platform, I noticed a man standing too close behind me. Not touching. Just close enough that I could feel his presence. When I stepped to the side, he adjusted with me. My pulse ticked up, subtle at first. I moved again, pretending to check the transit map. He paused as well, watching without looking like he was watching. Could have been coincidence. Could have been nothing. Except I felt that same invisible threat tighten in my chest. The train roared into the station, brakes screeching, wind whipping my hair across my face. I boarded quickly and stood near the door. The man entered 2 cars down. I kept him in my peripheral vision, telling myself not to overreact. Telling myself I was not a variable. At Queensboro Plaza, he stepped off when I did. That was when coincidence stopped feeling like comfort. My heartbeat thudded in my ears as I climbed the stairs to street level. The platform was crowded enough to be safe, but the sidewalk outside thinned quickly. I considered calling someone. I did not. Pride can be loud when fear whispers. I turned onto my block, the streetlights casting long shadows across the pavement. I did not look back, but I listened. Footsteps. Steady. Measured. Still there. My building was 50 yards away when a black SUV rolled smoothly to the curb beside me. The rear door opened before I could react. "Get in," Adrian's voice said from inside, calm as ever. I hesitated for half a second. The footsteps behind me slowed. I did not look at the man. I did not want to confirm what my instincts already knew. I slid into the SUV. The door shut with a soft, decisive click. The vehicle pulled away immediately. Through the tinted window, I caught a glimpse of the man on the sidewalk stopping short, scanning the street as if recalculating. My hands were shaking now, not dramatically, just enough that I had to press them together in my lap. Adrian watched me in silence for a moment. "You pulled your detail," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I adjusted it," he replied. "Why?" "Because I needed to confirm something." I turned toward him fully. "Confirm what?" His jaw tightened slightly. That the interest was not theoretical. The weight of his words settled over me. "You knew," I whispered. "I suspected." The SUV turned onto the main avenue, city lights reflecting off the glass. "And you let me walk alone?" He held my gaze. "You wanted independence," he said quietly. "I wanted proof." My breath caught, anger and relief tangling together. "That was reckless." "No," he corrected. "It was controlled." I looked down at my trembling hands, then back at him. "You said I was a variable," I said. "Am I still?" His eyes softened just enough to unsettle me. "No," he answered. "Now you are a target." The word should have terrified me. Instead, it clarified everything. My life had not simply brushed against his world. It had been marked by it. And whether I liked it or not, walking alone was no longer an option. The word lingered in the air between us long after he said it. Target. It did not sound dramatic coming from him. It sounded clinical. Defined. The SUV moved through midtown traffic with quiet precision, insulated from the city noise by tinted glass and controlled air. I stared straight ahead at the blur of headlights and tried to steady my breathing. "Take me home," I said finally. "That is where we are going," he replied. His voice was even, but I could feel the shift in him. Something tighter now. Focused. "No," I clarified, turning toward him. "Take me back to my apartment. Not somewhere else. Not one of your secure properties. My home." He held my gaze for a long moment. "Your apartment is no longer secure," he said. "It is a 4th-floor walk-up with a broken lobby camera, and a landlord who ignores maintenance requests." I blinked. "You investigated my landlord?" "I investigate vulnerabilities," he answered. The calm certainty in his tone made my chest tighten. "I am not relocating because someone followed me on the subway," I said. "That could happen to anyone." "It did not happen to anyone," he corrected. "It happened to you." The city lights reflected in his eyes, making them look almost silver for a moment. You said you suspected, I pressed. How long? 48 hours, he said. My security team intercepted increased chatter linked to my name. Then your schedule was accessed through a hospital database request. My stomach dropped. My schedule. Shift rotations. Entry times. Exit times. His jaw hardened slightly. Someone was mapping your routine. The air inside the SUV suddenly felt thinner. I replayed the week in my mind. The coffee shop on the corner. The late-night grocery run. The subway platform. All of it ordinary. All of it visible. You told me you left that world, I said quietly. I left operations, he replied. Influence does not disappear. I folded my hands together to stop them from trembling. So what happens now? He did not hesitate. You do not return to that apartment tonight. You do not get to decide that. Tonight, he repeated firmer. I looked out the window as we crossed the Queensboro Bridge, the East River reflecting scattered city lights. If I agree to this, I said slowly, it is temporary. Everything is temporary, he said. Define temporary. Until the threat is neutralized. The word made my pulse spike again. And how long does that take? As long as necessary. Silence settled between us, heavy but not hostile. I studied him from the corner of my eye. The billionaire. The strategist. The man who measured risk like oxygen levels. Why does this feel personal? I asked before I could stop myself. His gaze shifted to me, steady and unreadable. Because you are the one variable I did not plan for, he said. The honesty caught me off guard. I swallowed. I did not ask to be part of your equation. I know, he replied. The SUV slowed, turning into an underground garage beneath a building that looked more like a private hotel than an apartment complex. Glass. Facade. Discreet security. Polished steel doors. This is not my home, I said quietly. Not yet, he answered. The words were not possessive. Not threatening. Just inevitable. As the vehicle came to a stop and the doors unlocked with a soft click, I realized something that unsettled me more than the man on the subway ever could. I was no longer deciding whether to step into his world. I already had. The elevator ride up was silent except for the faint hum of machinery and the steady rhythm of my own heartbeat in my ears. The underground garage doors closed behind us with a soft mechanical sigh, sealing off the outside world like it had never existed. Adrian stepped out first, then waited without speaking, one hand lightly resting against the elevator door to keep it open for me. The gesture was controlled, almost old-fashioned, and that unsettled me more than if he had rushed me. I stepped inside. The walls were mirrored, reflecting back a version of myself that looked smaller than I felt. Scrubs slightly wrinkled, hair pulled back too tight, eyes wide but determined. He stood beside me, hands relaxed at his sides, posture straight without effort. You are not a prisoner, he said quietly, as if reading the tension in my shoulders. Then why does this feel like a relocation? I asked. The corner of his mouth shifted slightly. Not quite a smile. Because you associate safety with familiarity, he replied. The elevator opened into a private foyer that looked like something out of an architectural magazine. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the Manhattan skyline in a wash of gold and blue. The East River shimmered below, traffic reduced to quiet lines of light. The air smelled faintly of polished wood and something clean, expensive, controlled. This was not an apartment. It was a statement. How many people have access to this floor? I asked, scanning the space. 3, he said. Myself. My head of security. And now you. The words landed heavier than they should have. Now you. I walked further inside, taking in the expansive living area. The low modern furniture. The silence that felt insulated from chaos. I cannot stay here indefinitely, I said, turning to face him. I have shifts. I have a life. You still have both, he replied. Transportation will be adjusted. Adjusted. I repeated the word, letting it settle. You speak like everything can be optimized. Everything can, he said. Not feelings. The word slipped out before I could stop it. He went still for half a second, then looked at me with an intensity that made the air shift. This is not about feelings, he said. It is about preservation. Of what? I challenged. His gaze did not waver. Of you. The simplicity of it disarmed me. I looked away first, walking toward the windows. The city stretched out below, vast and indifferent. Somewhere in Queens, my small apartment sat dark and unguarded. My mismatched dishes. My second-hand couch. My normal. You said I am no longer a variable, I said quietly. You said I am a target. Yes. And your solution is to remove me from my own life. He stepped closer, not touching, just within reach. My solution is to make you unreachable. I turned to face him fully. And if I refuse? I asked. He held my gaze, green eyes steady, unblinking. Then I will still ensure you are protected, he said. Just from a distance that increases risk. The control in his voice was not cruel. It was absolute. I studied him, trying to find arrogance, trying to find ego. Instead, I found something else. Calculation, yes. But beneath it, something almost personal. Why does it matter so much that I am safe? I asked softly. His answer came without hesitation. Because if something happens to you, it will not be random, he said. It will be because of me. The honesty settled between us like a line drawn in ink. I had stepped into his world by instinct, by compassion, by doing my job. Now I stood in the center of it, looking at a man who could command boardrooms and security teams with a glance, and realized he was not asking permission. He was making a decision. And whether I fought it or not, I was already inside the perimeter. The first night inside his penthouse did not feel like luxury. It felt like suspension. I stood by the window long after he stepped away to take a call, watching the river move in slow dark currents beneath the bridge lights. The city looked calm from 30 stories up. Distant. Manageable. That illusion lasted until my phone buzzed. A message from my landlord. Camera in the lobby is completely offline. Police. Stopped by asking about unusual activity in the building. Let me know if you are coming home tonight. My pulse quickened. I turned slowly toward Adrian, who had just ended his call. Police. I asked, holding up the screen. His expression shifted, subtle but immediate. He crossed the room without rushing, eyes scanning the message once. That is not random, he said. You said your team intercepted chatter. I reminded him. Was this part of it? He did not answer right away, and that silence told me more than words could. What happened? I pressed. Someone attempted to confirm your residence status, he said carefully. Nothing escalated. Nothing escalated. The phrase echoed in my mind. You told me this was controlled, I said. It is, he replied. Because you are here. The weight of that reality settled over me. If I had walked home like usual, if I had insisted on normal, I would have stepped into uncertainty alone. I sank onto the edge of the sofa, pressing my palms together to steady them. This is not my world, I said quietly. I treat broken bones and dehydration. I argue with insurance providers. I do not live inside threat assessments. He moved closer but kept a respectful distance. You are not required to understand it, he said. Only to survive it. I looked up at him, searching for a crack in the composure. And how long does survival look like this? I asked. How long do I stay inside a perimeter you designed? His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Until I eliminate the uncertainty. Eliminate, I repeated softly. You keep using words like that. Because uncertainty is dangerous, he said. Especially when it attaches to someone I did not plan for. The admission was quiet, but it shifted something between us. I stood slowly, meeting his gaze. You did not plan for me, I said. And I did not plan for you. But you cannot solve this by relocating me like an asset. His eyes held mine, steady and unreadable. You are not an asset, he said. Then what am I? I asked before I could stop myself. The city lights reflected in the glass behind me, framing us in gold and shadow. He took a slow breath. A responsibility, he answered. The word should have felt cold. Instead it felt heavier. Personal. I crossed my arms, not defensively but to contain the rush of thoughts. You are trying to control an outcome, I said. But you cannot control me. A faint, almost imperceptible curve touched his mouth. I am not trying to control you, he said. I am trying to keep you alive long enough for you to make your own choices. The honesty unsettled me more than arrogance would have. My apartment in Queens felt farther away than 30 stories. My old routine felt like a life I had already outgrown. I had stepped in to save a man bleeding in a parking garage because it was instinct. Now instinct was pulling me somewhere else entirely. And as I stood in the center of his carefully constructed world, I realized something I had not wanted to admit. Part of me was no longer trying to leave. The next morning I woke up disoriented by silence. No traffic grinding outside my window. No neighbor arguing through thin apartment walls. Just quiet air and filtered sunlight pouring across polished floors. For a moment I forgot where I was. Then I saw the skyline beyond the glass and remembered everything. I sat up slowly on the edge of the guest bedroom bed, listening. The space felt secure, almost serene, but my body had not adjusted to safety yet. It still braced for impact. I checked my phone. No new alerts from my landlord. No strange messages. Just a text from the hospital asking if I could cover an early shift. Normal. Ordinary. I exhaled, relieved at the small anchor of routine. When I stepped into the main living area, Adrian was already awake, dressed in a dark suit, reviewing something on a tablet. He looked up as if he had sensed me before I made a sound. You slept, he observed. Eventually, I replied. I moved toward the kitchen, unsure where anything was until he gestured subtly toward the cabinets. Everything here felt intentional, organized, controlled. I need to go to work, I said, pouring coffee into a porcelain cup that probably cost more than my monthly utility bill. You will, he said, with an adjusted schedule. I turned to face him. I am not quitting my job. I did not suggest that. His tone remained calm, but I recognized the undercurrent. He had already arranged something. What did you do? I asked. He set the tablet down carefully. Your hospital has increased security around your entry points, he said. Officially, it is a precaution following recent incidents in the area. Unofficially, they were encouraged. I stared at him. You intervened. I removed exposure. My pulse ticked up again. You cannot keep restructuring my world every time you identify a risk. I can, he said quietly. And I will. The certainty in his voice unsettled me more than raised volume ever could. This is not just about danger, I said. This is about control. He held my gaze. Control reduces chaos. Sometimes chaos is human, I countered. He studied me for a long moment, then stood, closing the distance between us without touching. You believe this is temporary, he said. I do not. The statement hung between us. What does that mean? I asked. It means the individuals monitoring you are not improvising, he said. They are escalating. The word tightened my chest. Based on what? Increased digital probes. Attempts to access hospital credentials again. Subtle but consistent. I set the cup down before my hand could shake. So this is not fading. No, he said. I searched his face looking for doubt. There was none. Only calculation layered over something deeper I could not quite name. If this continues, I said slowly, how does it end? He did not look away. It ends when the risk becomes politically inconvenient. Politically. I repeated. Public alliances deter private threats, he said. My mind caught up with the implication a second later. You are not suggesting what I think you are, I said. He did not answer immediately, which told me everything. You said I am a responsibility, I continued, my voice steady despite the storm building underneath. Responsibilities can be formalized. The air felt heavier, thicker, charged with something I had not anticipated. I looked at him, at the man who could alter security protocols with a phone call and reshape environments like they were blueprints. You cannot solve this with a contract, I said. His gaze softened, but his voice did not. It would not be a contract, he said quietly. It would be protection with permanence. The word echoed in my mind. Permanence. I had stepped into his world by instinct. Now he was suggesting I anchor myself there by design. And for the first time since that night in the parking garage, I felt the ground shift not with fear but with something far more dangerous. consideration. The word permanence followed me all the way to the hospital. Even with a discreet driver and a different entrance arranged by someone who clearly thought 3 moves ahead, I could not shake it. Protection with permanence. It sounded strategic, calculated, clean. It did not sound like something that should alter the course of a human life. I worked 12 hours that day, moving from room to room, checking vitals, adjusting medications, listening to heartbeats through a stethoscope that felt steadier than I did. The hospital hummed with familiar urgency. Pages over the intercom, rolling gurneys, the scent of antiseptic and overbrewed coffee. No one knew that between those walls and the skyline across the river, my life had shifted into something unrecognizable. Around 3 in the afternoon, my supervisor pulled me aside. "Security is tightening protocols," she said quietly. "Administration says it is precautionary. Do you know anything about that?" Her eyes held mine, curious but cautious. I thought of Adrian's tablet of digital probes and risk assessments. "No," I said honestly. "I just come here to work." She nodded, but I could feel the change in the air. Doors that used to stay unlocked now required badge scans. Visitors were screened more thoroughly. Subtle adjustments. Invisible shields. When my shift ended, the driver was waiting again. The routine was forming whether I approved or not. I slid into the back seat, exhaustion pressing against my temples. Adrian was not there this time. Instead, a small envelope rested on the seat beside me. My name written in precise, controlled handwriting. Claire Bennett. I stared at it for a long moment before opening it. Inside was a single sheet of paper. A summary of recent attempts to access my information. Dates. Times. Redacted sources. Nothing graphic. Nothing dramatic. Just evidence. A pattern. My schedule. My address. My name appearing in places it should not have been. The SUV moved smoothly through traffic as I read, each line tightening something in my chest. This was not paranoia. It was documentation. When we reached the building, Adrian was waiting in the private foyer, jacket removed, sleeves rolled to his forearms as if he had been pacing. His eyes lifted the moment the elevator doors opened. "You read it," he said. It was not a question. I stepped out slowly, holding the paper between my fingers. "This is real," I said. "Yes." No embellishment. No comfort. Just truth. I looked up at him. "And your solution is marriage." The word felt heavy in my mouth. Formal. Final. He did not flinch. "My solution is alignment," he corrected. "Public alignment creates deterrence. It changes the cost of targeting you." "At what cost to me?" I asked quietly. He took a step closer, not imposing, just present. "You would have full autonomy," he said. "Your career remains yours. Your identity remains yours. The arrangement would serve a singular purpose. To make me untouchable," I said. "To make the risk unacceptable," he replied. I searched his face for manipulation, for pressure. Instead, I found something steadier. A man who had spent his life calculating leverage, and was now offering his own name as armor. "And if I say no?" I asked. His gaze did not waver. "Then I continue protecting you without that advantage." The implication was clear. Slower resolution. Prolonged exposure. I folded the paper once carefully. "You are asking me to alter my future because of your past," I said. "I am offering you a shield built from it," he answered. The skyline glowed behind him, the city stretching vast and indifferent. I had stepped into his world by accident. Now he was asking me to anchor myself there by choice. And for the first time, the question was not whether I trusted him. It was whether I was willing to let his name become part of mine. Silence settled between us after his last words. Not tense, not rushed, just heavy with consequence. I stood there holding the folded paper like it might dissolve if I pressed too hard. Marriage. Not whispered in romance. Not offered with flowers or promises. Offered like a strategy. Like a firewall. I walked past him toward the windows, needing distance to think. The city below did not care about my decision. Yellow cabs cut through traffic. Office lights flickered off one by one. Somewhere in Queens, my old apartment sat dim and ordinary, and for the first time it felt like a memory instead of a place. "If I agree," I said slowly, keeping my eyes on the skyline, "this becomes public. Yes, Adrian replied. No hesitation. Your name attached to mine. Yes. Your past attached to mine. Pause this time. My present, he corrected. I turned to face him. You do not get to rewrite your history because it is inconvenient. His gaze did not harden. It deepened. I am not rewriting it, he said quietly. I am containing it. I studied him carefully. The billionaire who controlled boardrooms. The strategist who calculated risk in percentages. The man who had been bleeding in a parking garage and looked at me like I was the only steady thing in the room. Do you even believe in marriage? I asked. It was not sarcasm. It was a real question. Something flickered across his expression. Not amusement. Not dismissal. Something almost vulnerable. I believe in commitments that alter leverage, he said. I let out a slow breath. That is not what I meant. He stepped closer. Just enough that I could feel the shift in the air between us. I believe in permanence, he said more quietly. The word landed differently this time. Not strategic. Personal. And this would not just be an arrangement to you? I pressed. His jaw tightened slightly before he answered. If it were only an arrangement, I would have presented it as a contract, he said. This is not that. My pulse quickened at the implication. Then what is it? I asked softly. He held my gaze unflinching. It is the only way I can guarantee you are not expendable to anyone who views you as leverage. The honesty unsettled me. Not because it was manipulative, because it was sincere. I crossed my arms loosely, grounding myself. You are asking me to step into your world fully, I said. Not just hide inside it. Yes. The simplicity of his answer stripped away illusion. And if I change my mind later? I asked. You would not be trapped, he said. You would be protected. The distinction mattered to him. I could see it. I walked past him again, slower this time, thinking about hospital corridors and subway platforms and my landlord's text message about broken cameras. Thinking about the man who followed me and the document outlining attempts to access my lifelike data. If I do this, I said finally, turning back toward him, it is not because I am afraid. His eyes softened slightly. I know, he said. Then understand this, I continued. I will not be a silent accessory. I will not disappear behind your name. You would not, he replied. I would not allow it. That answer should have sounded controlling. Instead, it felt protective in a way I had not expected. I looked at him, really looked at him, and realized something that shifted the ground beneath my hesitation. He was not forcing me. He was offering himself as the barrier, the shield, the consequence. If I agree, I said slowly, it will be because I choose it. He inclined his head once, solemn. Then choose, he said quietly. And for the first time since that night in the parking garage, I understood that the most dangerous step was not into his world. It was toward him. I did not answer him that night. Not immediately. Choice requires silence. It requires space wide enough to hear your own thoughts over someone else's certainty. I went to the guest room and closed the door softly behind me, leaning back against it as if the wood could steady me. Marriage. Permanence. Protection. None of it had been wrapped in romance. None of it had been disguised. He had laid it out like a strategic proposal and then handed me the decision. I slept little. When morning came, the skyline outside the window was washed in pale gray light, the river almost silver beneath low clouds. I stood there barefoot, watching the city wake up, and realized something uncomfortable. My fear was not about him. It was about losing control over my own future. Later that afternoon, Adrian asked if I would accompany him to a foundation board meeting. Visibility matters, he said. If this proceeds, it begins with presence. I hesitated, then agreed. Not because I was convinced. Because I needed to see his world without standing behind glass. The building downtown was all steel and quiet confidence. Executives in tailored suits. Assistants moving with discreet efficiency. No one questioned my presence at his side. No one asked who I was. They assumed. That assumption carried weight. In the conference room, as he spoke about investments in expansion and public partnerships, I watched him differently. He was controlled, yes. Strategic, absolutely. But he was also precise. Every word measured. Every pause intentional. He was building something larger than profit. Influence. Stability. Deterrence. When the meeting ended, one of the board members approached us. "You are Claire, correct?" the woman asked, her tone polite but assessing. "We have heard about you." My pulse quickened. "He speaks highly of your decisiveness," she continued, glancing at Adrian briefly. "It is rare." The comment lingered long after we left the building. In the elevator, I looked at him. "You disgust me," I said. "In context," he replied. "Context. As someone who altered an outcome," he clarified. The doors opened to the underground garage, and for a moment the quiet enclosed us again. "If I do this," I said slowly, "it cannot be framed as rescue." His gaze sharpened. "It would not be. I am not something you acquired in a crisis," I continued. "I am not leverage to be deployed." He stepped closer, not imposing, just present. "You would stand beside me," he said. "Not behind me." The distinction mattered. I could hear it in his voice. "And if this becomes real," I pressed, "it is not only to shield me. It is because you want it." The air shifted again, heavier now. He did not look away. "I do not offer permanence lightly," he said. "Especially not to someone I respect." The word respect landed deeper than any promise could have. I searched his face for doubt. Found none. Only conviction layered with something quieter. Something human. I took a slow breath, feeling the weight of the city above us, the future unfolding in directions I had never planned. "Then understand this," I said carefully. "If I step into this, it is not because I am cornered. It is because I choose you." He held my gaze steady and unguarded. "Then choose me," he said softly. And for the first time since the parking garage, my decision did not feel like surrender. Felt like power. I chose him 2 days later. Not in a ballroom. Not under flashing cameras. I chose him in the quiet of his living room while the city moved outside like it always had. "Yes," I said simply, and the word felt steady. Not dramatic. Not impulsive. Just certain. The announcement came within 48 hours. A carefully worded press release about partnership, alignment, shared values. The media did what media does. Speculated. Analyzed. Rewrote our story into something easier to consume. Billionaire marries nurse. Former power figure settles down. They reduced it to headlines because headlines are easier than truth. The truth was more complicated. The truth was that I walked into the courthouse wearing a simple ivory dress that I chose myself. No stylist. No spectacle. Adrian stood beside me in a tailored dark suit, composed as always, but when he looked at me there was no calculation in his eyes. Only focus. Only presence. The ceremony was brief. Legal. Binding. The officiant's voice echoed softly in the small private chamber. When it came time to say my name, I did not hesitate. Claire Bennett. When it came time to take his, I paused for half a breath, feeling the weight of everything that name carried. Not fear. Not doubt. Just gravity. "Claire Bennett Callahan," I said clearly. The words did not feel like surrender. They felt like alignment. His hand tightened around mine when the ring slid into place. Not possessive. Steady. As if confirming something internal rather than claiming something external. Cameras waited outside the building. Flashes igniting the afternoon air. Security maintained distance without aggression. Reporters called out questions about timing, about strategy, about optics. Adrian did not answer them. Instead, he turned slightly toward me, giving me the space to speak if I wanted to. I met the microphones with calm I did not know I possessed. "This is not a transaction," I said. "It is a choice." The words carried further than I expected. The noise softened after that. The narrative shifted subtly. Not rescued. Not acquired. Chosen. That night, back at the penthouse, the skyline looked different. Not because the city had changed. Because I had. I stood at the window again, remembering the night I first arrived here, unsure whether I was stepping into safety or confinement. Adrian joined me quietly, standing close but not crowding. "It will settle," he said. "The scrutiny." "Let it look," I replied. "I am not hiding." He studied me for a long moment, then nodded once, something like respect passing between us without words. You understand what this means, he said softly. Yes, I answered. It means they think I am in the palm of your hand. A faint, almost amused exhale left him. And are you? He asked. I turned toward him fully, meeting his steady gaze. No, I said. But you are learning how to open yours. Silence followed. Not heavy, not uncertain. Just calm. The city lights shimmered against the glass, and for the first time since that night in the parking garage, there was no calculation between us. Only choice. He ruled boardrooms. He influenced markets. But that night, as our reflections stood side by side against the skyline, I understood something far more powerful. He could command the city. I chose him anyway.